Chapter 17. For a fortnight, Amon, Iltani and Arya stayed in a rented house in a fishing village not far from Eridu. The tiny village bore the name of Iranana, and the villagers had the tradition that when Inanna fled Eridu with the sacred May, she had embarked onto the river at this place. Iltani found the name of the village quite auspicious, which was why they hadn't moved on. The owner of the house where they were staying had been more than happy to accept a silver shekel to give it up for as long as they wanted it. When they arrived, Amon had been doing very poorly indeed, and Iltani began to despair. Arya had demanded to speak with whoever passed for a healer in the tiny village. When a bent-old fishwife at last came to speak with her, she took the woman to see Amon. The fishwife examined Amon's wound and shook her head.
"It is very bad," the old woman said. "But I know of something which might help."
The old woman took Arya to her home and showed her a dried flower that was bright pink with dark pink veins.
"It's called the geranium," the old woman told her. "Seek them out in sunny fields not far from the river."
Arya searched near the village for hours before she found a field with a few of the pretty flowers blossoming in the sun. She collected as many as she found and took them back to the old woman, who boiled them in a covered pot and collected the steam, which slowly dripped into another clay vessel. Eventually, a pinkish oil distilled from the cooling steam. When there was enough, the old woman gave it to Arya.
"Give him a cup of water with these few drops to begin with. I'll make more and give it to you later. After several days of drinking this oil, his body will replace the blood he has lost."
Arya thanked the old fishwife and went to Amon, who was sleeping fitfully on a straw pallet. She waked him and made him drink. Though he continued pale and weak for several days, at last he began to recover his strength, and by the end of a week neither Arya nor the pessimistic Iltani feared for his life any longer. Arya grew more frisky and playful as Amon's strength increased, and Iltani grew more and more annoyed at all of the double entendres and risque references which were liberally sprinkled throughout all of their conversations. Amon and Arya made an effort to involve her in everything they did. Well, almost everything. But she had to make a constant effort not to allow the tiny worm of jealousy that had found its way into her heart to grow any larger.
"The two of you need to get married so that you have a productive way to work out all of your excess energy,"
she told them, a little more sharply than she had intended.
"If only we had a priest or priestess here who could do the job,"
Amon lamented, looking pointedly at Iltani.
"I am no longer a high priestess of Inanna,"
Iltani objected.
"Well, since whoever they gave the job to would probably deliver us to our deaths, I think that I would far prefer you to officiate rather than anyone else,"
Amon answered. Arya agreed.
"The goddess has not repudiated you. She will accept your authority."
It took a lot more importuning and justification, but finally Iltani agreed, though she insisted that they make a production of it and invite the entire village. Amon wasn't sure he wanted to make a memorable scene that might lead to loose lips revealing where they were staying, but Iltani would not be dissuaded.
"Marriage is not just an oath between man and woman,"
she insisted.
"It is the fundamental basis for our entire community. We may have been cast outside the path of fate, but we are not above the decrees of the gods. Inanna will not bless your union if you do not take her decrees seriously."
With Iltani to egg her on, Arya began to go a little crazy with all the preparations. She spent more money than the entire village would see in a year on expensive items that required several of the fishermen to collect them in Eridu. Now that he was feeling like his old self again, Amon found that he was struggling to come up with a proper present to give his bride-to-be which she hadn't already bought for herself. At last, he came up with something, but hesitated to pursue it, as it would require him to do something that was both foolhardy and dangerous. He felt Balashi's voice in his head cautioning him not to do something so foolhardy. Arya had told him that Balashi might not be dead, but he felt certain that his friend was gone. He had shed many tears over the past several days, but at last he had come to accept that, as Arya insisted, Balashi would not want him to continue to mourn him. The more that Iltani and Arya spent on the wedding preparations, the more he became convinced that he would have to go through with his foolhardy plan if he was to have any chance at all of giving Arya something memorable. He chose to be discreet in what he shared with his bride-to-be, telling her only that he must go to Eridu to get her present.
"You know that I appreciate a present as much as any girl,"
Arya told him.
"But the wedding may well be ruined if the groom fails to show up at the appointed time. If you aren't back when we're ready, I may just have to go ahead and marry that young fisherman with the broad shoulders."
she threatened.
That one has less sense than the fish he catches. If you are going to get a proxy, I insist he at least be clever. What about that little ferret-faced fellow who mends the nets all day?
Amon suggested.
He looks like a 12-year-old,
Arya protested, wrinkling her nose.
Perfect,
Amon exclaimed.
Iltani told me not long ago that I look much younger than my age. You have filled out somewhat since then,
Arya said, eyeing Amon speculatively.
I'd say you look at least 13 if you look a day.
I guess that makes you a cradle robber then, Amon accused.
I've always wanted the ability to mold my future husband's young mind. It makes everything go so much more smoothly when everyone understands exactly who is in charge in a relationship,
Arya explained. I would say it feels more like warping than molding, Amon replied. But at least we can both agree that I am the one who makes all the final decisions in this relationship.
If that is what you think, you really have been warped, my dear,
Arya answered.
But don't worry, I'll soon put you right.
I look forward to some hands-on molding from you, Amon said with a grin. But it will have to wait until I get back from Eridu.
Fine, if you must,
Arya exclaimed.
But this present had better be mind-blowingly fantastic, or you're going to find yourself spending your wedding night in the company of sharks rather than your new bride.
Make it a company of mermaids instead, and I might consider it, Amon joked.
How about if I tie a rock to your feet and drop you in the river to go searching for mermaids?
Arya suggested with a growl. That would make it difficult for me to go and get your mind-blowing present, Amon warned.
Get out of here before I come to my senses and reconsider this whole wedding,
Arya said with a push. Amon walked up the road from the river to Eridu. He stopped by the market in town to buy a woolen sack and a large pitcher, and then he made his way toward the palace. He was dressed in a woolen fisherman's robe, and occasioned no more notice than any of the many other commoners on the road. Once he got near the palace gardens, he stepped off the road into a nearby thicket, and then went to the hidden entrance into the palace. He came out in the storeroom. After listening intently in the dark for several minutes, he concluded that the palace was strangely quiet. Perhaps the death of Lipet Enki had changed things. Whispering a prayer to Enki to thank him for the lack of guards, he snuck down to the landing above the dungeon and undid the hidden catch. He found the hidden tunnel exactly as he, Dumuzi, and Balashi had left it. He collected several of the strange glowing fruits and put them in his bag, then filled his pitcher, stopped at the top, and made his way out of the palace with no further encounters. The wedding consisted of a strange blend of the opulent and the mundane. The entire village turned out in their best clothes, but as it was a poor village, their best clothes were little more than rags. Arya had decorated their borrowed home with the customary reeds and mud from the river, signifying fertility, as well as garlands of wild flowers and sprigs of sweet-smelling herbs. Amon and Arya each donned the costly linen wedding cloaks brought from Eridu. The women of the village had all been pressed into service, preparing the dozens of dishes that Arya felt were indispensable. There had likely never been such a feast in this village since its founding. There was practically every type of food that Amon had ever seen or heard of. He took a large helping of turtle soup and poured some of it into the river as a libation for Balashi's spirit. He murmured a few words of thanks to Balashi and told him that he hoped he was able to eat turtle soup in the underworld. Iltani officiated for the saying of the vows, and many of the villagers were overawed by her splendor in the clothing and regalia of her office as high priestess. Several even whispered prayers to Inanna, half convinced that the goddess herself had come down among them. At last, the well-wishers all went home, each family taking as much food as they could carry. Iltani had received invitations from a dozen different people, offering her the use of their homes for the night. She chose a small hut with only 2 occupants, so that she wouldn't put out too many people, and the young husband and wife thanked her profusely for honoring them as they left to stay with relatives nearby. Iltani went into the hut and lay down. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to let her excitement and joy at the union of her 2 friends overcome the feelings of solitude and loneliness which tried to push themselves forward. She was happy for Arya, she really was, but a small part of her mind insisted that this should have been her wedding night, that Amon had pledged himself to her before he had ever even seen Arya. She rolled over and pulled a pillow over her head, intent on silencing the mean-spirited, covetous thoughts that she was finding it so hard to ignore. In another hut in the small village, Arya grinned mischievously at Amon. "Are you all worn out after your long day, poor thing, or do you have a bit of energy left?" With the amount of energy I have, I may never sleep again, and neither may you, Amon replied. But first, I have a present I want to give you.
Ah, the mind-blowing gift you deemed it worth risking your life to acquire,
Aya said knowingly. She glanced around.
Where did you find the space to hide a palace in this tiny place?
It is something better than a palace, Amon answered.
If this turns out to be another handful of supposedly magical olives, I just might be disappointed enough to go straight to sleep.
It's something much better than olives, Amon replied. He pulled out the sack which contained the fruit of life and withdrew one. Aya took one look at it and began clapping her hands in excitement.
Wow, you brought me a fuzzy, dried-up blue and green caterpillar. Do you know how long I've wanted one of those?
She chirped enthusiastically. Your sarcasm is a bit overblown, Amon replied. And your guess is dead wrong. It isn't a caterpillar. You eat it.
You can eat caterpillars,
Aya protested.
But I don't think I want to eat this thing. Are you going to tell me that it tastes like a warm breeze blowing off the ocean? That doesn't even make any sense,
Amon replied dismissively. How could you taste a breeze? This thing tastes, well, not horrible, but pretty bad. Kind of like raw mushrooms.
Great, so you brought me foul-tasting mushrooms that look like caterpillars,
Aya said sarcastically.
It kind of makes me wish that you had stuck with mind-blowing olives. Will the fuzzy caterpillar mushrooms at least make me live forever?
Well, you finally figured it out, Amon said. And it only took you what, like 4 tries?
That was 3 tries,
Aya corrected.
A palace, a caterpillar, and olives.
And a warm ocean breeze, Amon insisted. That makes 4 tries.
Fine, 4 tries,
Aya agreed.
So what is supposed to be so fantastic about these mushroom-flavored caterpillars?
You already said it, Amon told her. They make you live much longer. My father called it the fruit of life. When you eat it and drink from the waters of the Abzu of Enki, it grants you great longevity.
Too bad we don't have waters from the Abzu of Enki,
Aya moaned theatrically.
Oh well, half of a long life has got to be worth at least a couple of dozen extra years, right?
Amon produced the pitcher full of water.
Let me guess, waters from the Abzu of Enki?
Aya hazarded. You got it on the first try, Amon said.
I'm trying to get the joke,
Aya replied.
You aren't doing a very good job of being funny.
I should have been serious from the start, so that you would take this seriously too, Amon replied penitently. Beneath the palace of Eridu, there's a hidden cave with a pool that they say goes all the way down to the center of the earth. The pool was created by Enki. Inside the cave, there are these strange glowing fruits that grow on the wall. I have never seen them anywhere else. You may have heard the legend that my family was granted extremely long life by the gods. Well, it isn't just a legend, it's true. Some of my ancestors were supposed to have lived 38,000 years or more.
You're serious? You snuck into the palace of Eridu to get these?
Aya asked. Amon nodded. Completely serious, he said. Aya smacked him a stinging blow on the top of his head.
You idiot!
She shouted.
You went alone into a place where you have dozens of enemies who would gladly kill you on sight, and you did it the day before our wedding!
She slapped him again for good measure. I thought it would be worth the risk if it would buy me an extra century with you, Amon replied. Though if you plan on slapping me every time you get angry, I probably ought to rethink that.
Huh,
Aya said.
You couldn't wait to see if one night with me was worthwhile before you were already signing up for a century. No wonder you drove Balashi nearly insane. You really are a muttonhead.
I tend to be a little impulsive sometimes, Amon admitted.
That's the understatement of the century,
Aya answered with a derisive snort.
Well, now that I am your wife, it's up to me to cure you of your worst faults, starting with your impulsiveness.
It's called impulsivity, not impulsiveness, Amon corrected. And I'm pretty sure that you are at least as impulsive as I am.
Ha!
Aya answered.
I don't go running about doing things that might get me killed, and more importantly, ruin all of the extensive decorating and food preparations for the most important event of my entire life, just to capture a mushroom-flavored caterpillar.
True, Amon granted. But you did take a boy you barely knew for a picnic up into the hills above Uruk. What if I had turned out to be an axe murderer or something? Aya laughed.
You're about as dangerous as a 3-day-old puppy. If you had tried to do anything I wasn't prepared to let you try, I would have wrestled you to the ground and shoved blades of grass up your nose.
I'm way more dangerous than you give me credit for, Amon replied. And my point still stands. I say that you are at least as impulsive as I am, so you have no place lecturing me about self-control.
We'll see about that, won't we?
Aya asked rhetorically.
I'll show you who suffers from excess impulsivity and who doesn't, and I'm going to start by not eating your mushroom-flavored caterpillar fruit.
What? Amon exclaimed in dismay.
I risked my life to get you that fruit. So you admit that your journey was stupid and dangerous?
Aya crowed.
Yes,
Amon answered, and then...
No, it wasn't really dangerous, but I suppose there was an element of risk in going to Eridu. Well, I'm certainly not going to do anything that will encourage you to do stupid things in the future. So the fuzzy caterpillar goes into storage for now,
Aya said, in a tone that brooked no argument.
That's stupid,
Amon protested.
We don't even know how long it will stay good. I already went and got it, so you can't retroactively cure me of my impulsivity by refusing to eat it now. Look, I promise I won't do risky things in the future, but only if you eat the fruit now. Nope,
Aya responded.
Maybe I'll consider eating it on our anniversary, but for now it stays in the bag. On our anniversary? That doesn't even make any sense,
Amon complained.
You're not thinking about this logically. Look,
Aya interrupted.
We aren't going to argue about it. The sooner you learn that I'm always right, the smoother this whole marriage thing is going to go.
Amon groaned theatrically and slapped his palm to his forehead.
What have I gotten myself into? It's too late for regrets,
Aya warned.
I'm betting that I've already got you 10% cured of your impulsiveness. In another month, or maybe 2 tops, I'm going to have you stopping to consider whether or not it's wise to lace up your sandals in the morning. The most impulsive thing you'll do in a year will be to decide whether or not to add a bit of butter to your bread.
If you're done tormenting me, can we move on to the next activity? Amon asked hopefully.
Done? I'm just getting warmed up,
Aya told him. Well, I've been warmed up for a while, Amon responded with a lecherous wink.
Is that so?
Aya asked.
I thought you were just starting to regret this whole arrangement.
I'll take the time for regrets later, Amon promised. After I finally see what exactly I've let myself in for. Aya smiled a mischievous grin.
Why don't you come over here and find out then?
I think I will, Amon replied, as he took her into his arms and kissed her.